Hello and welcome to not quite a review of To the Moon. This is a game by Freebird Games. It was first released in 2011 for PC and then later on for Mac and Linux as well. And you're already confused by the title, I'm sure. Not quite a review. What does that mean? Well, it means that this is pretty much a review, but it's not quite. What I'm not going to do in the end of this thing is actually put a score on it, because this isn't like most games out there. This is one of those you either like it or you don't kind of things. And to be honest, it's barely even a game, if even a game at that. There's not really a failure state. And so it's kind of hard to really classify it as a game per se. As an interactive story, definitely. Very easy to classify it as that. And that's what I pretty much treat it as, even though you might as well call it an adventure game of sorts, because it kind of plays out more like that. It plays out more like a point-and-click adventure game than anything else, which leads me to the presentation, because you're probably sitting there going, wait a minute, this looks like a JRPG, not like an adventure game. Well, that's because it was made in the software called RPG Maker, which is specifically designed to make the JRPG style of game, but you can, with practice and trying to fiddle with things, actually make something that's not quite a JRPG. In the case of this, they made what is effectively an adventure game, because you can just click on things and move around and interact with things. It's a very rudimentary system, but it works. But as far as the presentation goes, it is in that RPG Maker style. That does present some implications on the actual way that the controls work. I'll get to that later on. But the graphics themselves are actually very well done. They're obviously pixel art, and they work pretty well. There's quite a lot of detail in pretty much everything in the game. And it has a very nice visual charm to it. And when you actually go back into the guy's memories, again, I'll get to that in a moment, it takes on different color hues to really denote that this is in the past, or this is just not quite the real world. This is what we're going through in this guy's head. And they've managed to pull the visual style off very well. They've also managed to pull off the audio very well, and it blends together with the actual events going on in the story to make a surprisingly immersive experience. And the music itself is very well done. It's often very simple, but the thing is, it's supposed to be. And if I remember correctly, the guy who actually wrote the game, Kan Gao, I'm terribly sorry if I pronounced that name horribly, but I believe he's actually a musician. I should explain why everything fits in with the music so well. But they've done a good job with that. Now, obviously, there's no voice acting to speak of, so there's nothing really to say there. And the sound effects are pretty much what you would expect from a game in this art style, whereas they're sort of beeps and bloops in a lot of spots, and they're these kind of 16-bit sounds. And they're done in that sort of Japanese style of a game where you can just, if you've played those games, you're very familiar with that style. It's going to be very familiar to you. And it works, but those sounds really aren't all that impressive. What is impressive, however, is the music and the visual style. But that's not really what matters here. What really matters, since this is supposed to be a game, are the story and the gameplay, but since it's not really much of a game, I'm going to go ahead and get that out of the way. What do I mean by it's not much of a game? Well, you can click and move your people around, you can pick up items, and that's kind of it, actually. What little gameplay there is consists in the form of these, what are effectively sliding puzzles. They're not quite sliding puzzles the way they actually play out, but whenever you have to go from memory to memory, you have to find a memento in order to actually access that new memory. And to be able to actually go through this memento and into the new memory, you have to prepare it. What to do is you have to make an image appear using buttons along the sides of the image to control the columns, the rows, and the diagonal. And you basically just have to make the image appear. It's very rudimentary puzzle solving, really not that hard, and from what I can tell, there's really no bonus or penalty from doing badly or doing well with them. It's just kind of a, oh, you happen to do it better than somebody else kind of thing. And so that's pretty much what the gameplay is. You just move around, you click on things to look at them and to find out what the characters think about them and what they might actually mean to the storyline and all that sort of thing, and you do these puzzles. There's really not much to it, and the engine really does show its issues with regards to the controls, because you'll click on things and sometimes it just won't fully function because you have to go through a certain movement sequence before you can actually go to the movement sequence you wanted. And you'll see this on things like going downstairs in an area where you're not quite transitioning to a new area, you're just going down some stairs on there, and you'll stop at the bottom of the stairs or at the top of the stairs after moving along them, and then you have to keep clicking on things in order to actually be able to go to what you actually wanted to see in the first place. It's that sort of thing that sometimes messes with the pathfinding, and it becomes very obvious that it was designed in an engine that was supposed to be played on either, say, a gamepad or a keyboard, not with the mouse. And they just kind of stuck that on there, and it does work, but it leaves a lot to be desired, and that's pretty much the only real gripe with the gameplay, apart from the fact that there's really not much to the gameplay. There's not even really any puzzle solving with items or anything like that. It's just finding things very easily. In fact, it pretty much spells things out for you. And you're not really going to have any issues with the gameplay at all. It's just a matter of whether you find it alright or not that the game has so little gameplay. But what really matters here is the storyline. As I've said, this is basically an interactive story, where your interactions basically tell you more about what's going on and that sort of thing. The basic premise is that you play as two characters throughout the course of the game. The first of them is Dr. Rosaline, and the other one is Dr. Watts. They are members of this thing called Sigmund Corp, I believe is the name. I don't remember all that well because they didn't mention it all that many times. But the idea is that they are in the business of wish fulfillment. They can use this machine to go into a person's memories and actually implant a memory of the thing they wanted most, their last wish, so to speak. So they basically go around to people on their deathbeds and fulfill their last wishes in their own minds. And so they get the call to do it for this guy named Johnny. And he is this very old man who his caretaker doesn't know much about him. They don't really know much about his past, and they have to delve into his memories in order to actually find out why it is that he wants what he wants, because you need that desire to be able to actually fulfill the memory, or to fulfill the wish, I mean. And his wish is to go to the moon. The thing is, he doesn't know why. And nobody else around him knows why, so they have to delve back into his memories and go through pretty much his entire life, because they have to implant the memory at an early age to have it actually work with the rest of the memories. But the thing is, it's not so much that it's a story about implanting this memory in him and getting his last wish fulfilled. It's finding out why he actually wants to go to the moon, and exploring this story of this guy and what it means, and all these sorts of things that are really implied rather than actually outright said. They'll say things throughout the course of the game, and it pretty much expects you to make your own conclusions in your mind to what this actually means, and it doesn't really spell things out for you until really the end of the game, and by then it all makes sense. And here's the thing about this game. I really don't want to spoil the plot for you, because the plot is the real strength of this game, and it really shows when you actually play it. And so, what I have to say is I really, really highly recommend it, not because it's one of those kinds of, oh, well, it's just, an art kind of game. No, it's because the story actually is very, very well written, and it is very, very well played out. In fact, it's done so well that they actually manage to evoke emotional responses from you when you're playing it. Unless, of course, you basically have no heart anymore at all. And so, that's really the basis I recommend this thing on. It's not a basis of it being a really compelling adventure game or anything like that. It's a basis of it being an extremely strong story that will last with you. I mean, it's a fairly short thing. It's about 3.5 hours, maybe. And you will find that it's effectively like playing a movie. But that was kind of the interesting thing. When I think of other games out there that do this sort of thing where it's very limited interaction, it's very story based, I think instantly of things like Dear Esther, where it's extremely boring and just done for the sake of being all artistic and that sort of thing. And this one really doesn't. It comes across as something very heartfelt with a lot of charm, and it's really done on this more of a level of passion rather than this bizarre artistic desire. And so I really have to recommend To the Moon quite a lot, but I'm not going to do this like a review where I would slap on, say, a 5 out of 5 score or something like that. Because, again, this is one of those things, either you're going to love it or you're going to hate it. There's not really much in between there. Maybe you like it or dislike it, or you're like, whatever. But there's really not a whole lot to say about it, other than if you want to play something that is very story-driven and has a very strong, very well-written story that will probably provoke emotions in you, then I very highly recommend it, because you will probably absolutely love it. But if you're someone who doesn't like that sort of thing, I really can't recommend it to you, because you're probably not going to get anything out of it. So ultimately, it's going to be a very, very subjective kind of game. And that's why I'm not doing the full-on standard review practice, because it's just one of those games that doesn't really fall into that sort of category, the reviewable category, where there's things to actually properly assess about it. This is something entirely different. It's going to be one of those things where you either like it on a personal level or you don't like it, and that's kind of it. So ultimately, I really had a great time actually going through this thing. I played through the whole thing in one sitting because I just couldn't pull myself away from the game. I felt like I had to complete the whole thing. And I feel like that's the best praise I can give it. It affected me on an emotional level, and it really got me into the story and the characters and all that sort of thing. And yet, as a game, it wasn't really all that compelling if I just treat it as a game. But it was that story that really kept me in there. And those are the kind of people I have to recommend it to if you're looking for something like that. I actually went into this thing not expecting to like it, because I got it in the RPG Maker bundle, and I was like, oh, it's probably a JRPG. And I came out of it going, why can't I find more games like this? So I guess that's the best praise I can give it. Ultimately, I really highly recommend it, but just know what you're getting into when you're getting into it. Thanks for watching.